Hey boys and girls, welcome back to Reading with Miss Weiland. Today we're going to talk more about the fantasy fiction genre. And I want you to remember that it's a genre of stories that has characters, setting, and or plot that are highly unlikely to happen in real life or even magical. It can be all three of those things that are highly unlikely, two of them, or even just one of those items could bring a book into this specific genre. Okay? Today, when we look at the fantasy fiction genre, we're going to dive deep into one specific element that authors like to include in these books. The fact that magical objects are often found in these books. We're going to look at two specific books that I'm going to guide you through, and we're going to talk about what's a specific object that's magical in that book and how come that's an important object to that book. And then I'm going to read you guys a story. I'm going to tell you which object I want you to focus on, and you're going to tell me the importance of that object. I think we can do it. What do you guys think? You ready to get started? All right, let's start with the first book we're going to discuss. I picked one of the Harry Potter books to start our series off. We know that the entire Harry Potter series is extremely fantasy fiction. There's a ton of magic in there, from flying cars, we've got wands, we've got cauldrons, all these different magical things happening. So when I was reading the one specific to this lesson, which is the Harry Potter Prisoner of Azkaban, I thought really hard about what specific element is really important to this story. What would I not want left out of this story because it really is important to it, and why is it important? And I thought about the wands and the cauldrons again, but I kind of thought, well, they've already been introduced in the past books, so they really aren't changing the story a ton. But then I got to an important chapter where they introduced the magical map. Now this map I found really interesting because it wasn't introduced until this specific book, but if you keep reading the series or keep watching the movies, you'll notice it continually appears. Therefore, to me, it was a really important magical element that J.K. Rowling introduced into her books. Now, when I started to think about why was it an important and interesting object, here's what I came up with its importance in the book. I'm going to zoom you in because it is really small writing. So I found that when inactive, the map actually looks like a blank piece of parchment or paper. However, when they activated it, it became a map of Hogwarts and all the people moving around the school. Cool, huh? Well, the cool thing about this and the importance of this is it allowed Harry, Hermione, and Ron to be able to navigate through the hallways without getting caught. They were able to find things or people that were missing, and they were able to use it as a way to just avoid going places they didn't want to go. They found secret passageways. They knew which ones were good and which ones were bad. It really was a big piece of magic that they needed in their lives, and it changed the story a ton. So the next book I'm going to talk to you about is a new book that I have just recently read. This book is called Night of the Gargoyles. It's a really great book, and we were supposed to get to read it this year, so I'm going to find time later and record myself reading it in case you want to listen to it, which I think you really will. It was a great book to read, and my kids really loved it. But as you can see, Night of the Gargoyles is part of this fantasy fiction genre. There were different things happening that I'm like, no, this could not happen in real life. These characters could not be alive in real life. For example, gargoyles. I've seen them on top of buildings. Even downtown Hudson, a few of the houses have gargoyles on them. Very cool. But do they ever move? Not that I've ever seen. So to me, that was like, nope, not real. Must be fantasy fiction. But again, what I did while I was reading is I started to analyze my text a little deeper than just reading it to read. I'm trying to read to understand. And I found that the gargoyles were extremely important to the story and magical. So I picked the gargoyles as my magical object. Now again, I thought about it throughout the whole story, and I thought, what was their importance to the story besides the fact that they're on the cover, the story's all about them? Why? Why did the author include them as their magical piece in the story? So here's what I came up with. So during the daytime, these gargoyles look really mad and unhappy, just like my picture. However, what I found, which is a really cool plot twist, was at night they came alive and had a lot of fun. I felt like the author was able to bring the gargoyles' personality out through them being that magical element in their story. So here's what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read you a new story today called Westlandia, or Westlandia, however you'd like to say it. And I'm going to give you the element ahead of time so that you really know what to focus on while I'm reading. The magical object I want you to focus on in this story is the garden, the flowers. Okay? I want you to think about the garden in Westlandia and why is it important to the story? How does it change over time? What is its impact on the other characters? But what about it makes it a really important, magical, unrealistic object? Because your assignment today is to tell me that. You're gonna fill in my last box, okay? So let's get started reading Westlandia. Of course he's miserable, moaned Wesley's mother. He sticks out. Like a nose, snapped his father. Listening through the heating vent, Wesley knew they were right. He was an outcast from the civilization around him. He alone in his town disliked pizza and soda, alarming his mother and the school nurse. He found professional football stupid. He refused to shave half his head, the hairstyle worn by all the other boys, despite his father's bribe of $5. Passing his neighborhood, two styles of houses, garage on the left and garage on the right, Wesley alone dreamed of more exciting forms of shelter. He had no friends, but plenty of tormentors. Fleeing them was the only sport he was good at. Tormentors, based on the picture and the context, that tells me tormentors is another word for bullies. Each afternoon, his mother asked him what he'd learned in school that day. Seeds are carried in great distances by the wind, answered on Wednesday. That each civilization has its staple of food crop, he answered Thursday. That school's over and I should find a good summer project, he answered on Friday. As always, his father mumbled, I'm sure you'll use that knowledge often. Suddenly, Wesley's thoughts shot sparks. His eyes blazed. His father was right. He could actually use what he learned that week for a summer project that would top all the others. He would grow his own staple food crop and found his own civilization. What do you think civilization means? If you're saying community or area of people living together, yep, correct. The next morning, he turned over a plot of ground in his yard. That night, a wind blew in from the west. It raced through the trees and set his curtains snapping. Wesley lay awake listening. His land was being planted. I wish my gardens planted themselves. 5 days later, the first seedlings appeared. You'll have almighty bedlam on your hands if you don't get those weeds out, warned his neighbor. Actually, that's my crop, replied Wesley. In this type of garden, there are no weeds. Following ancient tradition, Wesley's fellow gardeners grew tomatoes, beans, Brussels sprouts, and nothing else. Wesley found it thrilling to open his land to chance and invite the new and unknown. The plants shot up past his knees, then his waist. They all seemed to be of the same sort. Wesley couldn't find them in any plant book. Are those tomatoes, beans, or Brussels sprouts? Asked his neighbor. None of the above, replied Wesley. Oh, look how big they are. Fruit appeared yellow at first, then blushing to magenta. Wesley picked one and sliced through the rind to the juicy purple center. He took a bite and found the taste to be an entrancing blend of peach, strawberry, pumpkin pie, and flavors he had no name for. Ignoring the shelf of cereals in the kitchen, Wesley took the breakfast of the fruit. He dried half of a rind to serve as a cup, built his own squeezing device, and drank the fruit's juice throughout the day. Pulling apart the plant, he found large tubers on the roots, or roasted on the family's barbecue. These he boiled, fried, or roasted on the family's barbecue, seasoning them with a pinch of the plant's highly aromatic leaves. Wow, he's finding a ton of uses for these plants. It was hot work tending to his crop. To keep the sun off, Wesley wove himself a hat from the strips of the plant's woody bark. His success with the hat inspired him to devise a spinning wheel and loom on which he wove loose-fitting robe from the stalk of the soft inner fibers. Unlike jeans, which he found scratchy and heavy, the robe was comfortable, reflecting the sun, and offered many opportunities for pockets. His schoolmates were scornful, then curious. Wesley allowed them 10 minutes apiece at his mortar, crushing the plant's seeds to collect the oil. The oil had a tangy scent and served him both as a suntan lotion and a mosquito repellent. He rubbed it on his face each morning and sold small amounts to his former tormentors at the price of $10 a bottle. "What's happened to your watch?" asked Mother one day. Wesley admitted that he no longer wore it. He told time by the stalk that he used as a sundial and had divided the day into 8 segments, the number of petals on the plant flowers. He adopted a new counting system as well, based likewise upon the number 8. His domain, home to many innovations, he named Westlandia. Uninterested in traditional sports, Wesley made up his own. These were designed for a single player and used many different parts of the plant. His spectators looked on with envy. Realizing that more players would offer him more scope, Wesley invited other games and invented new things that could include his schoolmates, rich with strategy and complex scoring systems. He tried to be patient with the other players, but it was hard. August was usually hot. Wesley built himself a platform and took sleeping in the middle of Westlandia. He passed the evenings playing a flute he fashioned from a stalk, or gazing up at the sky, renaming all the constellations. His parents noted Wesley's improved morale. "It's the first time in years he's looked happy," said his mother. Wesley gave them a tour of Westlandia. "What do you call this plant?" asked his father, not knowing the name. Wesley had begun calling it swifts, from the sound of the leaves rustling in the breeze. In like manner, he named his new fabrics, games, and foods until he created an entirely new language. Mixing the plant's oil with soot, Wesley made a passable ink. As the final to his summer project, he used the ink in his own 80-letter alphabet to record the history of his civilization's founding. In September, Wesley returned to school. He had no shortage of friends. So like I said, I want you to think about his garden, his plants. What was the importance of that story? It kept coming up. What was the importance of that item in the story? They did a lot of things. So why were they so important to Westlandia? All right, I hope you are having fun with this unit of fantasy fiction. We are all done with it now. We're going to be moving on to fairy tales next, which are very similar. But I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.